Good morning, everyone. My name is John Hierdink, and welcome to our Tribe Public CEO presentation titled Making Diabetes Management Simpler, the New Era of Insulin Therapy. This webinar event will be co-hosted by Jeb Besser. He's CEO of Modular Medical. They trade on the NASDAQ under the symbol MODD. Again, that's MODD. Modular Medical is an insulin delivery technology company with the first FDA-cleared patch pump designed specifically to meet the needs of almost pumpers with its user-friendly and affordable design. Modular Medical was founded by Paul DiPerna, a seasoned medical device professional and microfluidics engineer. Prior to founding Modular Medical, Mr. DiPerna was the founder of Tandem Diabetes in 2005 and invented and designed its insulin pump. Modular Medical's website is modular-medical.com, modular-medical.com. As many of you know, I am the managing member of Tribe Public. Our website is tribepublic.com, Tribe public, Public.com. Members from 31 plus countries and all 50 states have joined Tribe Public freely to gain direct corporate access to leaders and experts that they care about via our webinar events and also via 36 venue sites located across the US where we host community building, in-person lunch and dinner, and speaking engagements with local Tribe members. Tribe members, furthermore, are invited to submit names of experts and leaders of industry via our free wish list process at our website, adding names of companies and experts that they would like to meet to learn more. Please note that I am also the managing director of Vista Partners LLC, a registered investment advisory firm in California, and its website is Vista P Global, VISTA-P-Global.com. Please review both sets of disclaimers at each side at Tribe Public and at Vista P Global, and know that I'm currently a shareholder and an advisor to Modular Medical. A video of this event will also be published at the Tribe Public YouTube channel and be sent out to all post this event via the Tribe This Week, which is our weekly e-newsletter that goes out at the end of each week. I'd like to thank all of you for participating and for all of your questions that you've submitted, and remind you that you may send in more questions via the Zoom chat feature during this event. We'll do our best to get to all of them. If not, we'll try to invite Jeb back and Modular Medical at a later date. We're going to try to target about 30 minutes this morning and try to keep this an efficient process as usual. Next, I'd like to thank Jeb Besser and Modular Medical for joining us today, and invite James to tell us a little bit about himself and what brought him to being the CEO of Modular Medical, and I believe the single largest investor in this company. Thanks again, James.
Hey, thanks, John. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me. I'm Jeb Besser. I'm the CEO of Modular Medical. I am the PM of Manchester Management, which is the largest shareholder of Modular, and I also own stock personally. And my only compensation as CEO is equity-based. So I'd like to think that my interests are 100% aligned with anyone who owns the stock in the public market. So with that said, yeah, I mean, thank you for the introduction. I think, I'm gonna briefly summarize what our value proposition is, and then my understanding is we have a lot of questions, which I think will sort of dovetail nicely with what's probably on people's minds right now as far as the company. So we can get to those shortly. So Modular Medical was founded with the vision of targeting a pump to try and drive adoption of the 80% of people who require daily basal and bolus insulin who have not adopted a pump, even though pumps were introduced 25 years ago and offer better care. And the reason they haven't gone on a pump is some combination of too cumbersome, too complex, or too costly, or some combination thereof. And so we've tried to design a pump that you can learn in less than 30 minutes, that offers 6 configurations instead of 1,300, that offers the opportunity to drive much lower costs as we scale up and drive volume, and is an attractive form factor that people seem to prefer, like the Insulin Omnipod, which is the market share leader right now in the patch pump space. So that's the value proposition. We were cleared on our initial device, the Mod 1, last year on September 4th. Since then, we've been diligently working to stand up manufacturing, clean up, any remaining issues with the product, because as you might know, if you've heard me speak before, one of the unique features of the insulin pump clearance process is that you don't actually ever get it to put it on people and deliver insulin. So we're trying to gain some human experience using saline and the like right now. And we plan to do a limited launch of version 1, the Mod 1, in late July, early August of this year. And we plan to do multiple use trials before then in the month of July. However, we are not ever going to fully launch the current Mod 1 tubed version of the product. And the reason for that is both, one, we don't want to be labeled as a hybrid tube-based pump. And the whole reason that we added the tubed set was to reduce FDA risk, always planning to go to a full tubeless setup. And two, there is a worldwide shortage of infusion sets. If we wanted to be tubed, that would make it very difficult for us to launch and have a significant number of customers on that. So we plan to launch and have a few hundred customers on the Mod 1. And in September, we'll submit what we are calling the Pivot, which is our tubeless version, which I can show, which is pictured in our presentation now, and I can show pictures of it or hold it up. And the Pivot is easier to use, potentially eliminates the tube, and puts our destiny as far as our manufacturing capacity 100% in our own hands. And we believe, because that is a special 510K where you're asking the FDA a simple yes/no question, is this equivalent to the version that you approved last year, except for the fact that the set is underneath? So it's at least as good from a usability standpoint and a insulin flow standpoint. We think that we could potentially be cleared around year end and launch the Pivot both in the US and elsewhere in Q1. So that's where we are with the company. We did a $12 million raise in Q1, and we're spending $5 million of that on manufacturing improvements, which cut our cost of goods in half from the initial cost, which was frankly not very good, because when you have no scale, you don't have very good costs. And simple stuff: multi-cavity injection molds, a very small amount of automation, supply chain optimization, and design optimization for the initial product. And then the remainder is for general corporate purposes. So that money should last us well into Q4 of this year. So not enough to get us to launch, but enough to get us through submission, and enough to buy the long lead time molds, which we have to order a year in advance when we actually need them. So that's the corporate update as far as cash, as far as what we're doing from a commercial standpoint. Let's get to questions. Since we want to be efficient with people's time, let's get to the questions and start rolling through them. And then I think that'll probably cover a lot of the holes that, obviously a 5-minute whistle-stop tour is not going to get.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jeb, for the quick update. Just a reminder to anyone that wants to add a question, we got quite a bevy of questions that came in through the process of the invitations. But just a reminder that through the Zoom chat feature, which some of you started to already submit questions, please know that we'll do our best to try to get them addressed today. In no certain order, I'm just going to go down the list that I forwarded to Jeb earlier. Says, what differentiates the Mod 1 from existing insulin pumps, and how does your technology eliminate the traditional trade-off between complexity and efficacy?
Great question. Very much in line with what I usually talk about. So what makes us different is, one, if you don't know what the other pumps look like, this is a Tandem T-Slim. So this looks like an old school pager. This is a MiniMed, which looks like a Microsoft Zune. And then the Insulin Omnipod, which looks slick, like something that Apple would design. So clearly we're more like this product than the others. And then there's a new entrant, Beta Bionics, who has a product that looks a lot like the Medtronic MiniMed because their hardware is based on off-patent MiniMed technology. It's accepted as a touchscreen. So we're unlike them in that we are one, each of those pumps that I just showed you has 1,300 user configurable features approximately. Ours has 6. Ours, you have a controller where everything you need to do with the pump after you set it up initially, you can do with a button. So you don't have the fear of, oh, my phone ran out of batteries, I don't have my phone with me, or I need to play with multiple menus on a clunky device in order to get to what I need to do with the pump. But unlike other categories of product where we're giving you simplicity, but asking you to sacrifice accuracy, we are just as accurate as the leading pumps. In fact, we might even be slightly more accurate, but our claim currently is that we are just as accurate as the leading pumps. We just make it simpler for you to operate and learn, and we eliminate a lot of the features that involve changing your basal rate on the fly based on what you've eaten. And it turns out that according to the ADA, half of current pump users don't ever change their basal rate. So, we don't think that this next group of users are going to miss that very much. Just getting them to switch from multiple daily injections to a pump that has a basal drip and allowing them to push the button to bolus is an enormous clinical benefit, probably 90% plus of the benefit that you get from wearing a pump is covered in those 2 actions. So that's how we eliminate the trade-off. And we do it all by giving you the electronics in a detachable form so that all you're throwing away every 3 days is the cartridge. So you get the small form factor like Insulet, but you don't need cell phone necessarily. And you get 30 to 60 times, depending on whether or not we're talking about our current product or when we get 180-day life on this. We're using the most expensive pieces of the device 30 times longer right now than Insulet, soon to be 60 times longer. So you think about the cost implications of that, and the fact that we use a simple CR2032 lithium battery. Our consumable is 12 molded plastic pieces. This was designed from the ground up to be manufacturable and built in a lights out fashion. Okay, long answer to a short question.
No, but a great answer. With that being said, this addressable market that you're trying to, it's not really, you're not looking to replace the pumps, not to put words in your mouth, but you're looking to get these almost pumpers, that 80% of the diabetes population that are not opting to use a pump because of the high cost. So yes, you have these advantages, that's clear. But again, the advantages are really you're trying to just address this other 80% of this massive number across the world that just doesn't opt to.
Yeah, I think another way to say that, John, would be since 2011, consumers have had 3 choices in terms of what pump they could adopt. And they've had at least one pump choice since about the year 2000. So it's been about 25 years. And in 25 years, only 20% of people have adopted the technology. So to continue to offer them more and more features is not going to get that next large group of people to adopt. You have to make things easier. You have to bring the product to the patient, much like in order to get more people to have a coffee machine in their house, you had to bring them the Keurig instead of a fancy latte machine or another drip coffee machine. And so that's really what we've tried to do. We are not trying to take customers away from the other products. We are trying to drive more adoption of pumps. And we know from clinicians, potential users, et cetera, that there are things that group of users wants that are really important. Ease of training, ease of reimbursement, lower cost if possible, and tubeless, the right form factor, simplicity. I don't want diabetes to be my next big hobby. I want my diabetes to go away and be as unobtrusive as possible. And that's where we position ourselves. So, and everything we do in terms of what we do in the design of this product is towards that goal of making the experience easier. We're not going to add a set of features and try and out feature the other pumps. Although to be clear, we have the processing power and the communications tech and the accuracy to do everything mechanically that all the other pumps do. If you wanted to, if somebody else partnered with us and wanted to load all their automated insulin delivery functionality onto our device tomorrow, we could do it.
Interesting.
But we've chosen not to because it's a very expensive customer acquisition strategy for someone without a brand name.
Fair enough. Speaking of the technology, the microfluidics technology, can you elaborate on how it enables both affordability and ease of use of patients? What is it? What's its special sauce?
So everyone else in the space pumps insulin using a syringe-based solution where they have a finely machined metal cam, and their accuracy comes from how often that cam spins. Each time it spins, delivering X amount of insulin. And we use a linear peristaltic pump. Why is that important? One, well, we vibrate a bladder inside the reservoir, and that moves insulin very, very slowly into an intermediate chamber, and then we deliver it out with a cam. Our cam rotates we pulse every 30 seconds. Our competitors pulse every 5 minutes, typically. And as a result, we expose the patient to less insulin, and we use an air pressure sensor to detect how much insulin we've just moved out of the reservoir. So we get 10 shots basically to equal the accuracy of their one. But that accuracy comes from the gentle vibration of the reservoir, not from a finely machined cam. So we can use a plastic cam instead of a finely machined metal cam. And if the whole thing fails mechanically, it actually, because we pump with negative pressure in the reservoir, it actually pulls insulin away from the patient, which is an important safety feature. So we have 8 families of patents around this manner of pumping that we have. Linear peristaltic pumping is not new to the medical device industry, but it is new to insulin delivery devices.
Okay. Makes sense. This is switching gears back to what you had confirmed that you raised $12 million in Q1. What was
Yep.
the question is, what is the price share and did you participate? And is there any sort of color you can give to who invested in the $12 million alongside you?
Yeah, so about half the deal was was placed by Black River, was placed with high net worth retail. And the other half was entirely existing shareholders, including us. Manchester did say about $700,000 in the placement. And I personally did some as well. So that's and it was and look, the part of the reason we did it, frankly, was that we did a pipe in order to preserve availability under our baby shelf in case opportunistically there was an opportunity to raise capital later on at better terms at a better price, in a registered offering or through an ATM.
Yeah. And what was the price of that pipe? Do you remember?
I think it was 92 cents. And there was 50% warrant coverage, and the warrant was struck at $1.07.
Okay. And are those cash warrants?
Yes.
Okay. So someone would have to invest more in you to be able
Correct.
to get those.
Correct. And just so you know, because we do have a bunch of warrants or a bunch of different financings, all of our warrants are cash. All of our warrants are fixed and have no ratchet.
Okay.
The price is the price. And you can see a full breakdown of them on our cap table.
Okay. Thank you.
That's in our presentation.
All right. Here's another question. Can you discuss what the launch would look like? Pricing, early interest from buyers, inventory strategy, BD team size, and relative timeline. It's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I'll just say, I think I already covered what the initial launch will look like, which is we don't want a reputation as a hybrid tubed pump. We will not extensively promote Mod 1 We want those patients to be in as few places as possible, because when we get Pivot cleared, we're going to swap those patients onto Pivot. So we have to be able to find them and train them. We've started early discussions with payers. Our initial plan is to just simply accept the code for our predicate device, which is the Tandem T-Slim. Most payers just pay the same rate for all devices if you're on the medical benefit, and then individually negotiate on the PBM benefit. So, so for Mod 1, you won't see any promotion. We're going to have a very small number of people in a small number of institutions detailing to get customer experience and to have this on people, paying customers. And when we introduce Pivot, we plan to have a few reps that detail the high volume nurse diabetes educators, not to replace the existing pumps, but just to say, for a patient that rejects the big three or the big four, however you want to describe it, give them this as another option. Someone who doesn't want to deal with all the bells and whistles, who doesn't want the headache, who wants a simple training experience, etc. And so that's one avenue. And then we want to go after the endocrinologists, more than half of whom have never written a pump, who are not frequent pump writers, because we know that they have a large supply of people with diabetes who need help, who need care. And then there's another group of patients who are still seen by their primary care physician, who basically will never write a pump because they're worried about the complexity of it. And so we want to address those healthcare providers as well. And so our plan is to reach them through a network of indirect distributors. Because to do that with a direct sales force would be incredibly inefficient. One primary care physician might have one person with diabetes, another might have 50. And a lot of these distributors have experience selling other kinds of products where we think there's going to be a big overlap in terms of the customer base with people with diabetes who require daily insulin. So that's, in the US, that is our initial go-to-market strategy.
How do you, so specifically to endocrinologist, someone that doesn't write scripts for pumps, how do you convince that endocrinologist to take that on? How do you think that that's going to work?
I think the reason they don't want to deal with it is because of the hassle. But a lot of them just don't. One, they won't push the pump, and two, when they do, they don't deal with the burden of training someone how to use it. So it's very easy for someone to fall out of that flow anyway. So to have someone come in and say, look, here's a pump that will take, where you can onboard someone in less than 30 minutes. There aren't that many features, and you can retain the patient instead of referring them on in the case of a primary care physician, or you can retain the patient and keep them happy in the case of an endocrinologist. And oh, by the way, the reimbursement right now for training it on a pump is $51 under Medicare. And that's not enough for you to spend a day training a patient how to use a pump, which is why basically everyone offloads that expense and hassle onto the manufacturer themselves. We think with our training burden being so much lower, that we can get the clinicians, the diabetes educators, and the nurse practitioners themselves to do the training, because it's not that much of a burden. And, when you're making 50 grand a year, $50 for 30 minutes of work doesn't sound like such a bad deal. It could be an incremental revenue source for them. And they don't have to worry about there being some feature that's going to cause someone to call in the middle of the night and say, I don't understand what this double sine wave is that I'm doing because I somehow tipped off the pizza button. I haven't eaten in hours. What should I do? It's beeping like crazy. That's the call they don't want to get. So, so we think we're going to use an indirect sales force. And frankly, the product was designed for that from the ground up. Other products are not designed for that. Other products were designed by engineers for engineers with as many features as you can cram into them. And our design philosophy is just different.
Yeah.
And we think that will play overseas as well, where we also plan to use distributors.
Interesting. Well, I know we do have an international crowd here, so I'm glad you mentioned that today. I know we have a gentleman that's from the Philippines and some from other and Asia and in Europe. So
Okay, great.
it's a world issue, obviously, and people are interested. Here's a follow-up question in regards to the FDA. It says, how soon long will the FDA be able to approve the 180-day product in the next iteration, FDA clearance of the pump or longer?
Right. Okay. So I think that's how much risk. I'll generalize that question to how much risk is there, given that we're talking about going back to the FDA, and the answer is the volume of this special 510(k) to go to pivot is about 10% of the volume application of what we did last year. And because we just did it last year, we're quite familiar with the tests that are required. And so you can never say there's no risk with the FDA, and you can never say that there's no risk with any of these tests, but we're not adding any new materials from a biocompatibility standpoint. The set, frankly, works better with gravity if it's just a cannula that's going into the patient right below the device. We're not adding, so I don't think we're going to have a problem on insulin stability. We're not changing any of the materials in the fluid pathway, and we're making the fluid pathway shorter. I don't think we're going to have a problem with usability because, frankly, the product is easier to use this way, significantly easier to use this way. And our early studies show that. We just have to do them in a formal way. And so the initial filing in September is going to be just moving the set. Then we'll do a subsequent filing because remember, don't ask the FDA more questions because that can just confuse the issue and and delay your clearance for anything at all. Then we're going to do another filing where we add 180 days, and then a variety of other features that we think will make it more manufacturable, a new software package, etc.
Okay. And also, here's a follow-up. What is there a current timeline on the dual chamber pump that you spoke about in the past?
My answer on the dual chamber is still the same as it's been for some time, which is it's 95% finished. It reuses 95% plus of the componentry and design of what we currently have. But there's no predicate device. So to do that on spec would be to invite a lot of FDA risk that, frankly, we don't want to take. I know Beta Bionics has a dual chamber development R&D project going on right now where they're hoping to get their current product cleared because it does have an empty second chamber. I wish them the absolute best of luck because then that would give us a predicate that we could use as a fast follower. And maybe there's a drug application there that might be interesting at some point in the future. But right now, our focus is on trying to execute on a tubeless single chamber to serve the current market need without taking a lot of regulatory risk.
Okay. With this current path, has anyone shown interest in licensing?
You mean as far as the drug delivery technology?
Yeah, the technology.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. We are having those discussions, and both in the GLP-1 land and other areas too.
Okay. Since you brought up GLP-1 land, can you just speak to what the idea is there?
So the idea is quite simple. It's that we know that there are a huge number of people who drop the current weekly injectable therapies because they can't tolerate them, because of the GI side effects, or because of cost, or because they're dissatisfied with the clinical results because they're titrating up so slowly and they're paying a lot of dollars out of pocket as a copay in order to not see the results that they want to see. So, I'll warranty all day long that if you can lose 20% of your body weight taking a weekly shot, you're not ever going to wear a pump. But a lot of people can't tolerate the current products. And so our concept is to use an existing GLP-1, short-acting GLP-1, and deliver it through a pump. So you basically get that long duration of exposure to the GLP-1 receptor but you can also turn it down and then have that effect of turning it down happen very quickly instead of, oh, well, you took a shot, it's made you uncomfortable, you'll have to wait a week for it to wear off. And by mechanically delivering a basal, we think that you'll get a much more consistent result over the course of a week and a gentler curve rather than the crash and burn. Oh my God, I don't like this therapy. And then on the way back up. And also by delivering what we showed in our proof of concept study in rodents in the fourth quarter was that by adding a single bolus around a meal, and we think humans would add 3 boluses, so it would probably be much more effective. You saw a significant synergistic effect where with a much lower basal, you could lose 25 to 40% more weight by adding the bolus relative to a higher basal. And that's really significant because that means even if you went too high on the bolus around a meal, you would be living with that effect for only a few minutes. And you could potentially, if you had a sensitive stomach, you could potentially have good weight loss effect with a lower constant drip. And that's it to our pump, right? No other pump out there is this simple to learn, this form factor, and has a button, and is accurate enough to deliver a GLP-1 at a low cost, where you could bundle the drug with it. So that's the concept. But look, at the same time, we are not a drug company. We are a device company, and we are a platform and an enabler of people who have complementary skill sets in this. So I think, if we go any further with this, we might do one proof of concept study in humans to show how well this works with our pump. But the rest of the development's got to be done by a partner, preferably a partner that already has the active compound cleared as an injectable.
It's potentially making this exciting to a much wider audience of companies than that builds on the interests around diabetes and weight loss. So for instance, Medtronic, who recently announced that they're rolling out their diabetes, should be looking at you to some degree to fill that void as they roll out this new IPO. In the diabetes space, I would think they would be one candidate in this field. But we're talking about
I mean, look. I think let's break that down a little bit. So as far as GLP-1s, when I'm talking about a partner, I'm talking about someone who got a drug cleared, an injectable drug cleared, and like for instance, the original GLP-1 exenatide. There are more than 9 companies that have an ANDA cleared now. For a 3 times a day injectable with no weight loss claim, which doesn't sound like a very attractive product to me in its current instantiation, but you've invested the money. Maybe there's something else you could do with it. That's the first kind of partner that I would describe there. I mean, the other thing we talked about, dual chamber, maybe the other drug in a dual chamber besides insulin is a GLP-1. So our development work there will be useful. As far as Medtronic goes, I think Medtronic, for those of you who don't know, announced last week that they were going to IPO a piece of and then spin off the remainder of their diabetes business, which, kudos to them. I think it's the right move to separate it. The growth and profitability characteristics of that business are very different than the rest of Medtronic. And, I think their plan is to do a broad-based offering of CGMs, pumps, AID algorithms, and practice management software. And I think that's, that makes sense for them. Certainly the Medtronic offering has been out there for a long time, and I think we're serving a different audience. So I think we're incremental / adjacent to that, until they roll out something else that looks like our product, which I know they say they have on their roadmap, but they've been saying that for 15 years.
Okay. Well, it should be interesting. I guess that particular entity will be flush with cash and should, along the way, should be very interested in possibly building on that franchise that they have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, it's sort of. I know. There's a question here about who are the acquirers of us and where we are with that. And on the one hand, as I said, my interests are totally aligned with the shareholders. Um, we're open to partnerships, acquisition, distribution deals, et cetera, that allow us to be more capital efficient and reach this customer base rapidly. And then if somebody else wanted to use our platform to go into the more traditional pump segment, we could certainly see something like that happening. But at the same time, if you want to guarantee a very, very bad exit price, have no commercial plan. We're not afraid to bring this thing to market and take it as far as we can, because we do think we're serving a fundamentally different audience. So, right now, I think any acquirer would want us to have a tubeless version. Any acquirer or partner would want us to have, um, you know, optimized supply chain, would want us to, do innovative things as far as how do you train someone on this device, which is something we're working very hard on right now to try and make that process easier. So the clinician can basically guarantee the patient consistent onboarding experience where they're answering questions rather than doing all the talking themselves. So everything we do is driving towards that goal of let's make this easier and let's keep developing the platform. And if someone wants to use the platform for something else, that's great.
yeah.
Um,
So if someone says, what is your vision for Modular Medical's role in the diabetes care ecosystem 5 years from now? What would you say?
I would say everyone in this space in recent years has tried to innovate on software, tried to innovate on apps, on software, on adding more and more features. We've gone after this space and tried to innovate on the hardware, attacking the cost basis of the hardware, attacking the ease of use of the hardware, and trying to drive a new platform that's more accessible for a larger group of people. And by the way, that also has 3 mLs in a patch pump form, which allows people who require more insulin to access this form factor. So we think that software, CGMs, CGM integration, et cetera, that's all going to converge and become increasingly commoditized. And what's going to be special is if you have a different way of delivering on the hardware, and that the hardware is going to be a differentiating factor. And that's unusual. That's different than a lot of spaces where people have tried to innovate on software. We think software innovation is going to continue, but that we can partner/license a lot of that in and continue to drive innovation in the hardware.
Okay.
So I think 5 years from now, you're still going to need a device on your body delivering insulin. I think what's been proven over the last 2 years is GLP-1s might reduce the amount of insulin you consume on a daily basis, but they do not eliminate it if you already require basal and bolus insulin. If you're just touching basal insulin, yes, you can potentially get off of that. But if you're in that 80% that requires basal and bolus insulin right now, you're going to need to wear something that delivers insulin or other drugs or both.
Yeah. Here's another question. How do you wait a minute here? I think you answered that one. So what are the projected gross margins for Mod 1, and how do you expect these to evolve or pivot?
Well, I would say having 150 or 200 customers on Mod 1 is probably not a very profitable exercise. We will have no scale. We'll be buying expensive infusion sets from our supplier, and it's just not. We're doing that to gain experience, not to make money. As we scale the costs, because our economics are basically scale plastic economics, our costs drop precipitously. So just buying, the reason we're spending the $5 million is to drop our COGS 50%.
Okay.
And if we go to a semi-automated line, which is about 30,000 potentially, concurrent users, that'll drop our COGS another 50%. And we think that we We think that we're going to be very close to parity, if not at parity, fully loaded with our largest competitor in this space at something like 50 or 55,000 concurrent users. And it gets better from there. So, I mean, I know there was a question about 50%, are you 50% cheaper than your competitors? And the answer, at scale, and the answer is at scale, yes. On 1,000 users, no, that's absurd.
Yeah. And that's why probably at the end of the day, once someone, if, as you push this through, one of these competitors, if you will, one of these participants, I should say, in the space, since you're not really trying to go head to head against them or need to, they might see how large this market is, obviously know it, and might want to be able to have a chance to go grab some of it where they've proven the current offering doesn't grab this other 80% of the world's diabetes population.
Well, I think Insulet did something like 140 million units last year, or 140 million pods. Like, I think they're going to be the only single part patch pump in the market forever, basically, because they've got scale, they've got millions of process engineering hours and automation hours, and they've driven the costs of that thing down. And it's going to be very hard for someone to come in and try and compete with that. In order to compete, you have to do something different. And we've done something quite dramatically different in a whole bunch of ways. And that's, and the best barrier to entry we have is scale. If we start climbing that curve, we're going to be in a great position. And honestly, that's part of the value to a partner, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I want to do whatever I can to drive volume on our lines as fast as I can. I know there's another question there as to where are you going to sell product, and the answer to that is quite simply wherever we think we have the best net return. Right? Like in the early going is when our customer acquisition cost is higher in the United States, and reimbursement is in its infancy. If I can send some of those units to a market where I don't have any marketing cost at all and I'm selling bare pumps, I will very seriously consider that. And there are some markets like that we're looking at.
Speaking of other markets, a question just popped up. Says, I'm an advisor to a Korean company about to file NDA application for an anti-obesity vaccine not based on GLP-1. Modular Medical might be an interesting channel for us, as I am interested in what you've learned by working with the FDA on the drug that was cleared as an injectable. I don't know if that's necessarily a question or a statement, but
I mean, we got a device cleared, not a drug, and it went through the 510(k) predicate device pathway. That's a totally different division of the FDA with a different set of requirements and experiences. I mean, as an investor, I've invested in lots of drug companies, but that is hardware, especially insulin related hardware, operates in a completely different realm than anything else.
yeah. Well, I would take it nothing else. You're getting some people thinking today and saying how they might use Mod 1 or Pivot in
Yeah, look,
work.
like we're as long as we don't have to change the design fundamentally and do a lot of software re-engineering, we're open to other projects where we could be designed in, and where we're supplying pumps.
Yeah.
As long as it's a good fit. As long as it's a good fit for the volume that we have, for the accuracy that we're delivering, and the simplicity of our interface.
Yeah. It might be an interesting way to bring in non-dilutive capital along the way too, to push all efforts forward as these different.
Yeah, we're going to have to see how that develops. As I said, there's more going on here than just GLP-1, but that's the one that we've talked about
Okay.
publicly.
Well, that's interesting. I look forward to getting updates on that in the future as they materialize. Um, I think we've covered most of the questions today. One of the things I'd just like you to reiterate is this. Can you put some on the total addressable market? What is the dollar amount that sort of is being, that's being targeted, or someone might grab you and, buy you out, and what would they be looking to try to capture?
Well, it depends on how you want to use us, right? Like, Medtronic was tried to buy EOFlow for $740 million in cash, not yet cleared in the US, with a single part pump like an insulin Omnipod, but with no scale.
Mhm.
And, was that an outlier? I have no idea. But they were planning to basically re-engineer the product to go after the high end of the market with a patch pump. We're The way we usually size our initial market opportunity is at current reimbursement is $3 billion, which is 25% of the 25% of the multiple daily injectors that our survey of 10% of the endocrinologists and diabetes educators in the US said were the people who they would readily put on a pump.
Okay.
Who had already raised their hand and indicated some interest in a pump. So that's where we get our initial $3 billion TAM in the US.
Got it.
And obviously TAM grows if you start to add international territories. And that's not to say we won't get some other percentage over time of the 80% of people who aren't on a pump, but that's clearly, we have clear line of sight and designed our product to try and serve the needs of that almost pumper market, which we size as 25% of the MDIers.
Today, so we're going to sign off soon, but what would you, for the next 6 months to a year, what would you hold out as what you think are driving value, generating milestones, or what would you throw out to us to look for as you build this company?
Validation of the manufacturing in Mexico, human use, commercial human customers. Before that, first customers on insulin in these usability trials. Filing of Pivot's application, clearance of Pivot's application, and filing in another potentially interesting international market.
Okay. And then regarding Pivot, is there anything that we can learn on the website about Pivot at this point, or when do you think we'll get further details on that?
Oh, it's pictured in the presentation now. There are pictures in the presentation of someone wearing it. I can just show you. This is what the packaging looks like.
Oh, okay.
And this is the cartridge, which has one plastic piece different than the other cartridge, than the Mod 1 cartridge. The durable piece that sits on top, that we call the controller, is identical. There's literally no change. So we're changing nothing on the controller, one plastic piece on this, and then we have this patch, which has the cannula and the needle built in. And after you attach the patch and drive the cannula and the needle in, you just remove the needle by going like this, and you throw it away. So that's sharp safe. So that's the change in the product. I mean, like I said, I don't want to minimize this because a lot of engineering work has gone into this, but you're not changing a lot on the device the FDA already cleared, which is why we're fairly confident that this should go quickly.
Well, thanks, Jeb. I want to remind everybody that part of this process is the wish list process, where you vote and you state who you want to see. In this case, since we've had Jeb on today, if any of you are around the country, specifically on the West Coast, over the next few months, I know Jeb and his family are going to be on the side working away in the summer, and might be able to get him out to one of your venue events sites. And so just I encourage you to continue to express your interest. If you want to meet him in person, you want to hear more, you want to learn more, let me know, and we'll express that to Jeb and see if we can coordinate a schedule, an event in your locale. So again, thank you all for coming on here today. Thank you all for the great questions. Note that again, I'll have this event video up hopefully later today if I'm efficient. And Zoom gets it over to me quickly, and I'll get it published. And in the latest case scenario, I'll have it in the tribe letter at the end of the week. Again, thank you all for coming today, and I look forward to your questions and follow up. and thank you for your interest in meeting Jeb for all the other interesting questions you provided. Thank you, Jeb, and
All right.
look forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
you in the near future. All the best.
Thanks. Bye.